Hi, my name is Leo Chiang. I am a documentary filmmaker based in Taipei, sometimes in San Francisco. And today I'm thrilled to talk to my friends, John Shenk and Bonnie Cohen, about one of their many, many new films. These are just like the most productive people I know. In Waves in War, a very surprisingly emotional film about PTSD in the military that is now available on Netflix. I have to say that, I was super surprised by the film. It was not, it's actually funny, like, because I saw your email, John, and you said that you were surprised
Yeah,
by the story that you got. So I guess my first question is, well, why were you surprised?
this project has been going on for quite a while. We started this in 2019, and we were introduced to the main characters, Marcus and Amber Capone, who you meet in the film. And I think at first we thought, wow, ex-military Navy SEAL veterans doing psychedelics, there just seemed to be inherent drama in that. And of course, we knew a little bit about veterans kind of looking for ways to help themselves with PTSD from previous films that we've seen. But the surprising thing here was when we started to meet many ex-Navy SEALs and talk to them about the treatment they went through in Mexico. Many of them talked about the military, but a lot of them talked about previous trauma in their childhood as well, and how that played into kind of how they thought of themselves as men, what their role was in life, how it defined them, and then with the psychedelic treatment, kind of questioning all that and starting to think about healing on a kind of I don't know, a different scale or a different time in their life than simply the military history alone. That was probably the single most surprising thing that we realized along the way.
Yeah, I mean that's actually what surprised me too. I mean, I just really thought that, like, there's just stereotypes of, super macho military folks who are, wouldn't be vulnerable, but that's how, I mean, you guys really, like, w was there anything that you did, or, that you try to do in order to get them to open up the way they do, or,
Time, just time.
uh,
We spent 5 years making this film. We were introduced to a lot of the guys and their families through Marcus and Amber, the two main characters in the film, which is the only way you get into this community, by the way. You have to have some kind of an entree from the inside. And so we were actually starting from a point, because of their introduction, we were starting from a point of trust, a small amount of trust, rather than just being these, whatever progressive lefty San Francisco filmmakers. We were already in the trust circle with Marcus and Amber as human beings, as family, as husband and wife, because John and I are married, we have kids, we shared that with Marcus and Amber. So we went into these family circles of other Navy SEAL families with that cred, with that street cred, and that went a long way. And I think the fact that Marcus, who's, incredibly well respected in this community, had opened up himself. He had done the treatment back in 2017. So he was already a few steps into this by the time we got to him. That really moved these other guys to open up themselves. And, we also we drew the wives and the families into the story, which was extremely important because this is actually their story. These are the women were the people who really saved these guys, if you really want to get down to it. And that was also very surprising to us, but also a big part of how we kind of holistically moved inside their family circle and gained their trust.
and the choice of animation, that's actually, to me, such a huge prominent element in the film. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what were you guys thinking? What decisions did you make? How did you arrive at the different styles that you come to with the different characters? And also the war reenactment.
I mean,
Yeah.
the war stuff was really, we had this idea of kind of, instead of trying to do anything that was too photorealistic, we wanted to evoke memory. We were very taken by the style of like the Robert Capa photographs from D-Day that were very impressionistic, and there was a lot of movement in them, but your eye wouldn't be drawn to any specific, realistic element in the frame. So that really moved us, and we worked with this animator at AK Studios in London, Marcus Armitage, who he did all these charcoal drawings that were sort of layered over each other and created this kind of mystical memory, which was incredibly evocative of what was being discussed without having to take the guys into a re-traumatization, if you know what I mean. It stayed in their memory. It didn't sort of invite the reliving of the experience,
Hmm.
which was important to us. And John had very strong feelings and opinions about the psychedelic animation, which were which we discussed in particular ways very early on, and then we developed with these animators also in London. John can tell you more about that.
Ironically, in the film, for those who haven't seen it, the memory of these guys from war is kind of blurry and almost, like Bonnie said, almost impossible to kind of put your finger on and even know if it's true. Whereas the psychedelic animation and in the way that the guys talked about the psychedelic experience was like kind of with this crazy amount of clarity, like a lot of confidence about exactly what they saw, the time travel of going back to childhood memories, for example, the smell and the texture and the location and like like it happened just yesterday kind of thing.
Almost like they were waking up for the first time.
We didn't think about it as irony, but it is ironic that memory, things that actually happened to them in their recent careers, is blurry and hard for them to kind of put their finger on, whereas these kind of long childhood memories that have been with them for their whole lives are somehow crystal clear on the psychedelics. Another kind of working principle that we had was that we really wanted to not have this be cartoony in the ways that psychedelics have been presented in other kinds of, films. We grew up in the 70s and 80s when there was kind of like this, governmental initiative to try to scare people away from psychedelics and all kinds of cartoony, frightening images of what psychedelics could do to you. When we first started talking to these guys, it seemed almost spiritual and clear and like a life tour, like they were going back in their own lives to take a tour of their own experiences. And so in the animation of the film, you see like the present day character, Marcus or DJ or Maddie, kind of watching themselves as young children or other kinds of experiences in their lives. And we took those metaphors to these animators in London, like Bonnie said, and they assigned an artist to each of our main characters. So we had 3 different animators that we were working with, and I'm sure from when you step outside of verite and interviews and you start doing that kind of work, it's incredibly painstaking and time consuming and but really fulfilling. It was a stretch for us, but we really are proud of it and excited about kind of a new direction that we were able to go and to tell that story.
Yeah, I think that's great about your 3 main characters animation is they clearly have a visual language that connects them, but they're all each of them distinct. That they belong to the character separately. And did you rotoscope their faces? Is that
We gave the company rotoscope reference, like, Richard Linklater's films and things like that. But they ended up doing this thing called photogrammetry, where we took like a million pictures of the guys kind of to create a 3D model of them. And then they put that into a computer, and then that became kind of a puppet in a way that they were able to animate. And then we took other elements, like for example, in Marcus's animation, you see him kind of falling through memories. And the memories that he's falling through is actually thousands of photographs and videos that we transfer, just like you would for any archival project. And then the animators took those documentary elements and put them in the animation. And we did a similar thing with DJ. And so it's a combination of of computer 3D and archival elements and 3D models, and we were amazed at what these guys were able to do. It was really, it felt just kind of, it felt unique. We hadn't quite seen anything like it when they came up with it.
So you mentioned your three main characters. I'm actually kind of curious about the casting process, if you will. So it sounds like Marcus was your entry. Did you have other characters you were also following that didn't end up in the film, or was it pretty quickly that you knew that these were the guys that you wanted to follow, the families that you wanted to follow?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And there was a casting process. It wasn't really casting as such, but just a lot of conversations with many different retired SEALs, their families. And actually, the three main characters you do end up seeing in the film have pieces of, elements of a lot of the people that we spoke to. So there's like, we couldn't have done the work with the three of them had we not done all this other interviewing and time spent with many other guys. Um, I mean, Marcus, obviously, he was the entrance point, and the work that he started to do once he had done the treatment to kind of bring other guys in, we started to see this opportunity to kind of draw a parallel between the brotherhood on the battlefield that the Navy SEALs have and this way in which they were going to help each other in this next phase of their lives where they're trying to get healthy again once back to civilian life. And Marcus was really trained on that. So we thought, okay, let's first try and find the next character who is connected to Marcus's story in some way. Whether they were in the field together or their families were close or if they ever had a relationship in Coronado or Virginia Beach. And that's how we got to DJ Shipley and his wife, Patsy. And they were very close with the Capones, with Marcus and Amber, and their stories overlapped also when they were both SEALs. And then Maddie, it turns out, was a very good friend of Marcus's, going all the way back to basic training, going back to BUDS, which is the basic training of Navy SEALs. And he and DJ, as you find out in the film, were actually in the field in battle together. And so we became kind of obsessed with having the main characters have that kind of relationship so that you could see the way they were pulling each other along. And each of these three guys were also in different stages of their recovery. And so you could sort of see one hand off to the next and really be helpful in that way. And there's a trust amongst those guys as you start to feel, if their brother says to do something, they jump off a cliff, they'll go jump off a cliff. So this crazy treatment in Mexico, if they say to do it, I'm going to go do it. I have no idea if it makes sense for me, but I'm going to go do it, So we wanted to have that brotherhood also play a really major role in the film. So we ended up with these three guys who were really super connected to each other.
And I also thought that you guys did a beautiful job with the family. I mean, even though you could say that they're supporting characters, but they're actually like pivotal characters,
Yeah.
Especially the two wives, right? Am I
Mhm.
remembering right?
Yep.
That we
Yep.
really meet Maddie's other half, or if there is one. What were some of the thinking behind, shaping of the of Patty and Amber?
The story with Patsy, I think, kind of says a lot. We knew what we learned about DJ. Um, we knew that his storytelling capabilities were just amazing. He's very charming, kind of charismatic storyteller. We flew to Virginia Beach, which is, on the other side of the country, and to meet DJ. And we went out to dinner the night before what would have been the interview, and he brought along Patsy, and we didn't know anything about her. Turns out she's got this story where she was in the Navy herself. Her previous husband actually died in this operation that Maddie actually had been involved in. And then Patsy, just to hear her speak at all, she's incredibly articulate and emotional, and we just kind of fell in love with her. And Bonnie said to her, you have to be in the story. You saved DJ's life. You're really kind of the hero here. And she said, "Oh, no, 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 no. Not for me." And one thing led to another, and we kind of made a deal with her. We said, "Look, why don't we go ahead and shoot an interview? We don't have to use it. You could look at it, kind of let it sit with you, see how it feels to tell the story. And she agreed to do that. And that kind of dovetails, Leo, with I'm sure you know this thing that's going on in documentary where, this new way of thinking about our subjects as participants, and people who are that we're actually collaborating with. And it used to be that you would never shoot an interview without a release, right? But nowadays it's like actually it makes a lot of sense, right? That you would allow somebody to feel that and kind of understand how that process worked before they agreed to kind of sign their rights away. And eventually she did agree to be included in the film, and thank goodness she's amazing. The wives are really the true heroes of the story. Without Amber and Patsy, Marcus and DJ would not be here by their own telling. And so we're so I don't know we're kind of like amazed, continually be amazed by Amber and Patsy, even in the work that they're doing and the outreach about the film and the way they're kind of continuing to try to spread the message about you know hope and healing to people who are depressed and anxious and suffering in their community.
Yeah, and also thought that both of them and also just the families in general really gave a insight that, as an audience, I don't, I mean, I hear a little bit about how the PTSD, impacts the people in the community, but you don't see such a vivid demonstration of how,
Well,
how their lives are actually impacted.
and in these cases, the signature injury, there's PTSD, yes, but the brain injury actually causes people to become completely different people. Like the suicidality, which is such a big problem, but just the loss of memory, the lack of will to live, the inability to hold down relationships. I mean, that's the brain injury from these blast injuries that happen to a lot of Navy SEALs in the field. Um, really was excruciating to watch because they went to all these brain labs, and the VA and all these people tried to treat them, and there was no understanding that there was actually damage to the brain that was, a physiological change. And, so these families really were up against an impossible odds in terms of trying to save these guys. So they really deserve a lot of credit.
What do your or main characters, what do the families think about the film?
We just saw Caden in San Diego, Marcus and Amber's son, and the film just came out on Netflix at the beginning of November. He saw it, I think, for the second time with a group of his friends, and he felt really proud of it. He had a really, really hard time doing that interview. It was very, very painful for him and for his parents. But I think that since the film's come out, he's had a lot of people getting in touch with him and telling him how the fact that he shared his story has helped them and helped their kids. And he's been incredibly empowered by it. And the same for Patsy and DJ. They have two small daughters, and they showed the film in concert with a therapist to their girls. And it really was such an act of bravery. After the making of the film was an act of bravery, the showing of the film and the living of the film with their families, which is going to go on. We finish making films, and these live on for people for many, many years. I mean, we will be in touch with them forever. They're part of our extended family. But it's brave to be in the world with it in a way that I don't think anyone can anticipate when they're agreeing to be participants in a film.
How is this treatment received in this particular community? Like, is it become, more embraced, or there's still skepticism? Is the military kind of considering this as a viable treatment? I mean, how does that work right now?
It's a real mix. It's much more positive than you would think, considering, you know, these guys generally are not, the military community is not really exposed to this kind of alternative treatment um, in their culture, you might say. But they've the proof is kind of in the pudding, right? They've seen a lot of their friends really helped and transformed by it. I think Marcus and Amber have now their organization Vets has now sent 1,200 people down to Mexico. That's a lot. They're
Oh
at any
wow.
one time.
Okay.
I think there's like 3 or 4 thousand Navy SEALs at any one time. So that's a lot of people in their community. And the film was part of an initiative, a political initiative where uh, we went down to Texas to actually show the film to the legislature, who was debating a new policy in the form of a bill that they were debating about whether to fund psychedelic research in that state, and with the film plus a lot of other work that Marcus and Amber and others did, this bill ended up passing, and now there's $50 million available in state money to further the study of ibogaine in particular. So the tide is turning. It's slow, and there's a lot of work to do, and of course what we really need ultimately is better federal laws about these things, and to loosen the restrictions. But you know, we're fighting against what 40 or 50 years of kind of prejudice about these naturally occurring medicines, and uh, so far the Stanford study, which you see in the film, is one of the only studies specifically about this medicine ibogaine. So hopefully we'll see more action on that. That's one of the kind of outreach um, initiatives that we're part of with now that the film is out on Netflix.
I mean, are there anything else that you guys want to mention that I didn't even think to ask?
No, I think this has been great. Thank you so much for.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to talk to you about the film. You can tell we're super excited about it, both the kind of from a craft point of view. We had the opportunity here to stretch ourselves creatively in a really exciting way. And obviously the subject matter is so meaningful. It's been such a journey for us. So we're just excited to talk about it and have it out there in the world and have people respond to it in ways that we can't even expect. And that's the fun part about this.
Well, it's always great to see you guys' incredible work, so
Thank you.
beautifully crafted and always so powerful and so, making a difference in the world. It's you guys are who I want to be when I grow up. So,
Back at
so
you, right back at you.
all right, the Mutual Admiration Society will conclude.
Exactly.
Yes,
Um,
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
conclude
so
Yeah.
now. Thank you for being here
Well,
with us today.
thank you, and we appreciate you taking the time. It's very generous of you.
thank you guys and congratulations again.
Thank you.